Hello, welcome back to Realms of Forgotten Worlds video tutorials. I'm your host Albert Taylor, and I'm happy to say I'm back, as promised, to read the chapters myself and not to get a mechanical voice to do it. Okay, didn't have too many positive comments on that. Okay, so I'm going to do it myself. Okay, but first of all, I'd like to introduce the book really quickly for those who already know all this. Okay, the book is called Realms of Forgotten Worlds. Okay, so your adventure, you decide. Okay, we're going to get a look into parallel worlds, possibilities. Okay, multi-option, basically. That's what it's saying there. Has 71 decisions, 234 chapters, 70 tragic endings, and one goal, stay alive. Okay, actually the stay alive is a Reach book too. Okay, but that's, alright, that's an extra there. Okay. Alright, so the way science fiction is meant to be read. Okay, well that's what I'm hoping. Hope a lot of you see this original project. I really do. And that's the main objective here, is to keep this original. Okay, and going back to the main idea here, I'm going to be reading out myself, my voice, my beautiful reading voice. I'll be reading out the chapter, and I also have some commentaries after that, as you can see here in the title. So I'll be explaining the concepts I used here in this first chapter. Hope you really like it, and let's get ready. Okay, here we are. We're going to be seeing the first chapter in the book of Realms of Forgotten Worlds. This chapter is called Allies from the Past, and it starts like this. In the long, dark, forgotten stretch of cold space mapped out so very long before, a war-battered cruiser finally entered a section of space only accurately described by the oldest of colonists. The Milky Way was what that section of space was called, and was described with so many story variations that children really didn't know anymore if their ancestors were flesh-eating warlords or just capitalist entrepreneurs looking greedily out into the deepest reaches of space in search of more wealth than they already had and needed. The mysterious Milky Way galaxy and the human civilization within had pretty much left to fairy tales, except for what the original official records held in them, really out the flesh-eating part of the childhood stories, for most people at least. A crew of a little more than 40 passengers on that war-battled cruiser currently travel in deep artificial sleep, all in deep cryostasis, where only a handful barely managed to dream of their current losses. Though brain activity was supposed to be non-existent, a few dreamt, but a few remained in a repeating, merciless nightmare caused by very recent events. Space had always been viewed as a very hostile place, and unfortunately loss of human life wasn't at all uncommon for their generation, and especially for the practically unknown areas of space, where they were currently traveling. The result of harsh and unforgiving space conditions, mixed in, of course, with a small surprise attack, right when they thought they were out of harm's way, were the precise ingredients needed for tragedy and the nightmares that overcame them soon afterwards. They had originally started out with a crew of 60 perfectly healthy volunteers before takeoff, despite their maximum capacity of 50, simply because of the overwhelming odds of survival against them, and of course an obvious need to cover the essential posts left vacant during travel. That was the reason they had taken on 60 to begin with, even though their cryostasis capacity was only built to hold 50, though some considered that practice to be bad luck for any type of ship. The unpopular saying said that there had to be someone left over to fly the ship before the journey ended. Apart from space travel, common everyday life was also an extremely harsh reality that they had to live with from day to day. The presence of danger started at home. It went to work, it returned from school, and everyone knew that it would only get worse as time went by. Between the unforgiving nature of space and the merciless rebel enemy, the crew had already suffered greatly before even getting near the boundaries they simply knew as part of regular space. The path had supposedly been cleared by the battle cruisers a few days before, but something had obviously happened since then. Something had gone terribly wrong, or had been overlooked, though none had been surprised when the brutal surprise came out of nowhere. Once the surprise attack was finally over, everyone silently gave thanks it had not been them who had been killed, either lost in space or blasted to pieces with large sections of the ship. Everyone had silently wondered what else could be waiting for them further on, before they tried to get ready for the next tasteless surprise, but also prepared for their scheduled artificial sleep as well. In the end, everyone unanimously agreed cryostasis was a real gift to the ones who really didn't want to know if they were dead or not. Everyone openly agreed about that, but no one had ever disagreed that they would prefer not to suffer the fate of flying endlessly through space in a small radiation-battered cryopod, rather than facing their enemy face to face. The thought of the enemy's infamous and crude surgical integration into the rebel army was another factor to consider, though, once anyone thought about it to any great extent. The thought of a cybernetic implant taking your mind and body over and making you automated enough to be able to execute even your own children. That fact quickly made the idea of a frozen fate of flying uncontrollably through space seem like a really good option once again. Most people found that they could eventually get used to the never-ending dilemma of dying in space or getting captured over time, though the danger of radiation wasn't too far off the list of unwanted causes of death. Getting irradiated could at least be solved or treated in time, though somewhat painful and extremely inconvenient for anyone who still wanted to produce offspring of their own. Some other dangers were much smaller ones, like the common food poisoning from rebel spies, or simple but tremendously effective old-fashioned sabotage. But in reality that was already everyday life back home, and it had been for some time, and people were already getting used to it. It was just the way things were since rebels were everywhere, and they were winning the war. Pretty much everyone had gotten used to the idea, though no one wanted to live the rest of their lives hiding under a rock, and especially with family that needed to eat. It was pretty common knowledge that even a coward can turn out to be a tremendously effective combatant when forced into a corner. That much society had already found out and had proven many times to be true in their cruel everyday reality. Absolutely all of the surviving crew knew that rebels had been the reason for their slightly overdue and suicidal journey through practically uncharted space, though no one had been officially told that. Even though it was still a top-secret mission, most had no doubts that they were being forced to travel with barely functional and untested weapons, and with space charts over 200 years old. With that in mind, the current survivors only hoped and prayed that none of the thousands of possible dangers out there ever decided to make their journey any more interesting than it already was. Rebels were thankfully off the list, since they were not known to travel into uncharted space, though scanners would remain at full power, just in case. Robotic human rebels were apparently smarter when it came to taking risks, when one compared rational human behavior to a machine's logic, that was. Everyone knew that what they were currently doing was practically suicide, and it seemed almost certain that it would be illogical for the rebels to even try to follow them due to all of the unknown factors out there. Even human logic seemed rational enough to tell them that they shouldn't be risking so much, though every single human being knew that they were fighting against their own genocide, and not even the most optimistic could argue about that. Their silent ancestors were the only hope that was left, and the remaining leaders all agreed that they could still count on their home world for support, despite the deafening silence between them. Nothing had ever changed their loyalty to their homeworld, and they had maintained the status of colony, even though they had been on their own for so long. With loyalty on their minds, everyone just hoped that their ancestors had invented some kind of super weapon that they could use to blast all the rebel robot human scum to a cyborg afterlife. Unfortunately, they couldn't just phone home like 100 years before, since all communications had been severed without any explanation, and very suddenly, as if something unexpected had happened. Their home planet, or what was better known as to be their ancestors' home, had stopped communicating without prior warning, without any reason, and without a single warning, early one historic day about 100 years before. They were all alone back then when it happened, but that had been alright since they had been such a thriving colony planet to attend to. It really wasn't anything to worry about back in those days, and everyone remained optimistic for at least a few decades. The odd silence remained to be only a slight discomfort for most of the first settlers sometime afterwards, right until the other historic moment came, when some idiot decided to upgrade himself with unapproved cybernetic parts in some secret lab, giving birth to the robotic rebellion shortly afterwards. The cybernetic rebellion started as a crazy thought, almost credible movement. As a crazy, though almost credible movement, with the basic concepts of freedom and identity in mind. But soon afterwards, it started to look like something else instead. After the upgraded humans unexpectedly started to lose their human consciousness one by one, the crazy but almost understandable movement turned into a mad military effort to eradicate all unclean biological life, a change still blamed on the first rebel-built mainframe that had been supposedly built to guide them towards a coordinated effort for freedom. The result was an almost immediate declaration of war, which led to severe, unimaginable bloodshed, the millions being captured and upgraded on a planet-wide scale. It was some kind of new human evolution, some try to say, but it turned out to be just like genocide after a while. Some of the very last optimists soon discovered that the rebels didn't accept the old, the sick, or especially children, so the battle got really ugly and really fast once rebel objectives became crystal clear and they were going to just eliminate those incompatible elements. Human response inevitably adapted to the rebel aggression a couple of years later, with their own sadistic answers to the cybernetic threat. Ironically, it turned out to be practically identical to the conscious, bloodthirsty AI system driving the relentless rebels. That seemed to be the genius to it, and was something completely unexpected by the enemy. The creation of a good conscious mainframe system had sounded really funny to many, but raised tremendous concern once it was revealed to actually be real. By that time, though, people were already pretty desperate since humans were falling like flies, so the change came pretty fast, and thankfully without any real opposition that has stalled its activation. Once the first intelligent planetary system finally emerged to combat the conscious rebel system, even the human opposition found that they had to go cooperate, as the whole planet was on the point of being sterilized. After only a few short days, everyone remaining on the planet realized that they had become permanently dependent on that very AI system, and had no doubt that without it defending them, they would have already been part of the history of that lonely solar system in the coldness of space. No one could deny that, since they had all witnessed the surprising force and brutality of the rebel strike a day after activation, which would have certainly wiped everything living from the planet's surface in just a few short hours. A few slumbering minds went over the history of their survival in their minds, and especially of the fatefully ironic day when an artificial intelligence had to be activated in order to keep the remaining human population alive. As irony would have it, though, all of that neural activity and vital functions were currently being monitored by an almost identical ship AI, though most had no idea just how intelligent that system really was. The designers of the ship knew that no one could know, but also knew that there was no alternative, since rebel spies could still be among the crew, making human leadership unreliable. Though no human eye could see it, a bright blue monitor repeated the report of entering the ancestors' solar system on the bridge, but no transmissions could be sent back home. Not even a single seemingly harmless encrypted report of their successful survival would be prepared. Not even one rebel could know what they were attempting to do, since machines always seemed to be one step ahead, no matter what they did to prevent it. The simple truth was that rebels had spies everywhere, and they were practically undetectable to current scanning techniques, since they continuously developed better ways to hide themselves. The best way, after what seemed to be an eternity of scanning modifications and other ingenious inventions, returned to the most natural form of all, which was old-fashioned human detection, which consisted of pure instinct and gut feelings. It seemed to be the best way to go, though the trip that they had chosen couldn't be left to human instinct alone. Countless security measures had to be implemented to prevent failure, way before anyone had gotten on board the vessel. A total communication blackout had been one of those security measures, because it really was the only way to prevent the enemy from knowing what they were up to and where they were really headed. Another very carefully planned and executed security method was the use of intentional information leaks, which mainly hinted at a desperate attempt to colonize a barely inhabitable planet with an extremely strong electromagnetic field. Conditions even humans would have a hard time adapting to, but not completely impossible if they were desperate enough. They only hoped that the enemy had taken the bait and had sent their main attack force over there, instead of intercepting them after takeoff, like many had feared they would. Ancient star positions were being automatically identified in that moment as they became detectable, but no one could be witness to the beautifully displayed of magnetic boundaries surrounding the solar system on the screen, since the remaining crew still remained in cryostasis. It was more than convenience, though. The server already knew, since everyone was better protected from the radiation bombarding the vessel in that very moment, as they crossed the huge boundary of unpredictable particles and solar winds. Even though there were still several weeks to cover after that, every following second from that point on would be automatically recorded as a historic moment. Despite the surprising lack of human presence in that solar system region, failing to find any signs of a once ambitious civilization severely confused the ship's AI, though it wouldn't allow that discovery to disrupt the current mission in any way. The sooner they got help from their ancestors, the mainframe concluded, the better things would be for everyone. Some badly needed maintenance for the ship's mainframe server would be way overdue as well, and greatly appreciated. Okay, so little detail here. I thought some author's notes might be really nice here. I don't think it's very common, but I think it could be really nice for some people. Want to get the author's insight on this? Okay, so we're going to be going over allies from the past for the book Realms of Forgotten Worlds, and we're going to see what this is about. Okay, main reason, the idea of this is to help some people, maybe new to science fiction. Okay, maybe you like the concept of multi-option, but you're new to science fiction, so I really hope this helps people out and get some interest in science fiction. Okay, so as you can see from the beginning of Allies from the Past, we're in space, which is my favorite place since I was very young. Okay, actually really irresistible. This is a parallel type story here. This is the beginning of book 2, if you can imagine that. Don't let that get to you too much if that seems complicated. And just put that aside for now. For those who really like the idea, well, that's kind of the way it goes. It's a really complex type of story here. Okay, well, imagine I started this story when I was 12 years old, so yeah, some effort has gone into this, obviously, right? Okay, so back to the scene, the scenario of this. We're in space, okay? well, for people who don't like to be too much in space, they're actually on a colony world. Okay, so the scenario here is the home world. Won't specify the name of the home world. That's probably ruin a few things in later on book 2. But they sent well, they identified a lot of habitable planets in the different solar systems, and that's kind of our case right now, right? This world actually sent some ships to these worlds to colonize. Some to explore, some to colonize. In this case, they sent one with people to colonize. Okay, they were successful. Okay, that's where we basically start off. They have already set up shop, and they have a economy and everything set up, government. Okay, so they're pretty well into their civilization. They're going really well, as we stated here in the first part. Okay, everything's great, but all of a sudden things get quiet. Okay, they have this communication with their homeworld. Okay, like any good colony, and keep communications, but things suddenly get cut off. Okay, unexpectedly. Okay, they don't get too worried about it at first, but eventually they do. Okay, then there's some rumors and fairy tales and a lot of stories. Okay, well, you can just imagine, right? Okay, but they do have a good place to call home. All right, so most people were born there by then, so that's their home. All right, so there's no problem really. This place is really good until, okay, we're gonna get into cybernetic implants. Okay, these are little mechanical things you, basically the theory is you put into your body to enhance your functions, your skills, stuff like that, maybe your mental processing abilities. Okay, your strength, or I don't know, your organs or something like that. Actually, we have some things like that already. Okay, so, but this takes it a little further actually. This actually gets into the mental functions and stuff like that. We're talking about nanotechnology. Okay, somebody does it. It takes it a step further. Actually, it's kind of like outlawed here. Well, they have their laws that say this is permitted, this is not. Okay, but of course all humans like to take it a little step further. Okay, one person does. I guess in the beginning is okay, but he wasn't expecting for the implants to take over. Okay, and that's basically what it does. It takes them over. Okay, it's not really steady here, but probably upgraded a few more people. They form a little human network. Then eventually they create their own AI mainframe. Okay, so they have a network of people and they have their mainframe, which basically centralizes all of their commands and stuff and makes them less human in the process. Okay, so we can see pretty much it's a really bad idea. Okay, because the simple fact here that they send a spaceship back to their home world. They say here their ancestors' world. Okay, why they send the ship? Okay, well, very simply they're looking for reinforcements. They're over their heads right at this point. Okay, this AI movement. Okay, they called it a movement at first. It turns out to be a massacre. Well, you take into the logic of a computer. It's a little bit extreme. It goes a little bit beyond our reasoning sometimes. Okay, the computer objectives are completely different from human objectives. Okay, that's basically what's happened here. It went really fast, turned out to be something really bad, got out of control, and they're forced to send a ship back to the homeworld in hopes of reinforcements and some help, stuff like that. Okay, and we can see here in this paragraph here, before we turn the page, it okay, they took a lot of precautions. They sent the ship back to their homeworld and get a surprise attack, almost destroyed them. Okay, you see it's pretty psychologically it was bad. Okay, traumatizing, you could say. Okay, obviously, right? Well, apart from the fact that you're leaving all your family at home and you're traveling through space a few years to get back to a world you haven't heard from. Okay, probably all your life. Okay, so this ship is equipped with cryostasis. Okay, this is basically technology where people get frozen. Okay, it's an old theory back to the maybe perhaps the 70s, 80s. As a kid, I used to see this a lot. Okay, basically the theory you can freeze the complete human body, even though we know that's pretty complicated, but well, there's the theory, right? Okay, so they partially freeze. Okay, this is where this comes in. Partially freeze these people. So you still have a neural activity, and they're dreaming, and they're having a really hard time in their cryostasis pods. Okay, so that was kind of the idea here. You don't completely freeze them because there's different temperatures of the body. You freeze your brain at one temperature, and maybe your liver and your kidneys at another temperature, and your skin and stuff like that, etc., etc. Okay, so they're not completely frozen. There's some neural activity. This basically keep them in one place. That's basically what this is about. Okay, so remember the rebels are actually humans, but just upgraded with implants. Okay, so the enemies are spies. Okay, actually here we stated that they're pretty much undetectable. Okay, so they can infiltrate the human government and military and stuff like that, be your best friend, and suddenly something happens. Okay, people start getting killed. Okay, so there were a lot of filters, precautions for this trip, but there's still suspicion that there may be some, maybe one or two, possibly. Okay, so it's the ship AI is basically running things at this point. Is it basically? Well, let's go back a few steps before we get too far. The Planetary AI, this was the idea here. They were forced to activate an AI to protect them from another AI, artificial intelligence. Okay, basically they just had to keep up the pace. They were going too slow and they're getting eradicated. Okay, so pretty ironic there. AI against AI. Probably heard this story before. Okay, they didn't like the idea, but they had to do it, and they're alive because they did it. Okay, so they basically had the ship flying itself with its own artificial intelligence, simply because there could be a possibility of human rebel spies. Okay, see the idea? So, okay, so humans got smart just on the brink of time before they got eliminated. Okay, so their mission is piloted by an AI. It's taking them back to the ancestors' world. Okay, their home world. Okay, so at this point, all the crew is in cryostasis. Okay, they're currently headed back to the home world. Okay, that kind of goes in between the thoughts of the crew before and some of the dreams. Okay, pretty much the dire, gray, bad situation they're forced to live with, the way they're handling it, and the psychological impacts on their family, and basically think about death constantly, and well, how would you be forced to face it? Okay, kind of extreme. Okay, pretty cool. All right, you can just imagine a world like that, a whole world. Okay, all right, but we'll get back to that in book 2 if you still like the concept. We'll just get off just a little bit, okay, for this book, and we'll get back into it. Okay, so we have dilemmas, we have fears, we have traumas. Okay, just what you would expect, right, from a scenario like this. Really bad. Maybe somebody lost their whole family. They're forced to go on this mission, and well, you can imagine. Okay. So we go over that just a little bit, back and forth. Basically, a little bit of effort for people maybe new to sci-fi. We could go full blast if people are already into this topic, but I thought it'd be a really nice detail just to go back and forth just a bit to get the new people maybe into this a little bit. Hope you not scare them off too fast. Right? Okay. All right. So we go over a bit over the psychological aspects, the some actual science and physics here too. Okay. Go back over the details of the cybernetic start, the rebel army. Okay. Basically how a computer thinks and how they're capable of doing things. Okay. Just go back and forth just a bit, not to get anybody too confused. Okay, we see here old-fashioned human detection. Okay, yeah, that could be expected, right? People are just going back to the old-fashioned way of doing things. All right, since they probably don't trust computers a whole lot at this point. All right, which is really logical, I think, more than obvious. Okay, then we go back to the ship where they're at the moment. Okay, they've been traveling all this time, a few years. Okay, so they're going back to the solar system where this all began. Remember, they're in a completely different solar system. Okay, so they survived basically open space, all the radiation, all that. Okay, so they're going back into the homeworld's solar system. Okay, and here we can see a few hints that they found some stuff that they haven't. Oh, actually, they know the AI, the ship AI, has seen some stuff that it wasn't expecting really, because with the whole solar system really is activated. Okay, there's humans and machines going everywhere, this way and that way. Okay, so it's going across the border into the solar system, and a few things that really confuse the ship AI. Okay, but that's really the next chapter. But okay, so we're basically saying that they can't send any communication. Well, simple fact, because there's rebels listening, right? They probably don't know what the mission was about, where they're going, or even if they survived. Okay, so they can't send any communications either way. So it's pretty much a mystery if they survived or not. Okay, so that would take us to the conclusion of Allies from the Past and the beginning of our next chapter. Hope you really liked that. Of course, if you did like that, thumbs up would be nice. Let me know. And remember, this is going to be multi-option, so we're going to have some changes here in the chapters. So we're going to need some feedback. Some people see where you want to go in the story. Okay, so there's plenty of space for that. Remember the thumbs up if you like it, and we'll see you in the next chapter. Okay, I think we reached the limit of our time, so we find ourselves at the end of this video. Hope you really liked it, and hope to see you at our next tutorial. Before I end this video, I'd like to give my email here, alberttaylor77w@gmail.com, and also look for us on Facebook, Multi-Option Sci-Fi. Hope to see you there. Bye bye.